What if humanity's survival rested on one final chance to outwit an alien empire that's known no mercy? What if the fate of every living soul came down to a single human tactical move, one they never saw coming? In this story, you'll witness how far humanity will go to fight for what was stolen, as the scales of power shift beyond our control. The day the alien fleet descended upon Earth was the day the world trembled in fear. The devastation was unimaginable. Their power, their speed, their sheer force had left humanity reeling, fighting for survival with every breath. But amidst the chaos, there was one thing the invaders underestimated: humanity's will to survive. As the alien empire pressed on, seemingly unstoppable, humanity's remaining forces rallied. A small group of survivors, scattered and broken, forged an unexpected alliance, using their wit and the very weaknesses the aliens never anticipated. Revenge became their fuel, but the stakes grew higher as they uncovered more about the alien empire's dark motives. The heroes, ordinary men and women, transformed, not just in spirit, but in their abilities. From the ashes of destruction, they found strength in unity, resilience in the face of despair, and brilliance in outwitting their relentless foes. But as the final confrontation loomed, one question remained: could they make a move so daring, so precise, that they could change the course of this war forever? This is a story of survival, revenge, and the unyielding transformation of humanity in the face of annihilation. But the greatest battle lies ahead. Will humanity survive, or will it be the last mistake they make? Stay tuned, because this story is about to turn everything you thought you knew about power, resilience, and the human spirit upside down. How does that feel for the intro to your video? The sky was a bruised canvas, streaked with fire and the heavy scent of burning ozone. Earth, once a thriving cradle of civilization, was now a battlefield, a war-torn husk struggling to breathe beneath the shadow of a ruthless alien empire. Above, the stars had lost their serenity. The blackness of space seemed deeper, more suffocating, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 untold deaths. For months, Earth had been under siege. Alien ships, massive, otherworldly behemoths, had darkened the sky like locusts, blotting out the sun, their engines roaring in a guttural hum that reverberated through the ground. They moved with relentless precision, each strike calculating, methodical. Cities that once buzzed with life lay in ruin, their skeletal remains jutting from the earth like the last cries of a dying world. The landscape was scarred, forests turned to ash, rivers poisoned with the remnants of war. The air was thick with the acrid smell of decay, and the faint echoes of distant explosions filled the silence, a grim reminder of what had been lost. There was no peace, only the constant hum of the alien fleet, their unseen presence a constant reminder of the precariousness of life. As night fell, the only light came from the flickering fires of cities on the brink of extinction. The stars, once a symbol of endless possibility, now seemed distant, indifferent to the suffering below. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was a quiet resilience. Hidden beneath the wreckage, pockets of humanity lingered. Their existence had become a secret, a whisper, a shadow in the night. The war was not over, but their hope was fragile. The battle for Earth was shifting, and the alien invaders, for the first time, faced a force they had not anticipated: humanity's refusal to surrender. The mood of the world was heavy, tinged with hopelessness, but laced with a thin thread of defiance. The invaders may have crushed cities, but they had yet to break the spirit of the people. As the hum of alien engines vibrated through the desolate land, something stirred, an unspoken promise that the war was far from finished. The mistakes of the invaders were beginning to unfold, and the consequences would soon be felt in ways they could not yet comprehend. How does this fit the tone you're aiming for? The silence was shattered by the shriek of metal tearing through the sky, an unmistakable sound of another wave of alien ships descending. They arrived like clockwork, their sleek, jagged forms cutting through the atmosphere with a predatory elegance. Each wave was louder, heavier than the last, as if the invaders were testing the limits of what remained. But this time, something was different. The air felt colder, as if the world itself had braced itself for the inevitable. In the remnants of a forgotten city, a small group of survivors huddled in the shadows of crumbling buildings, their eyes fixed on the horizon where the fleet's ships appeared like dark gods from the void. The conflict was no longer about survival, it was about resistance. The invaders had taken everything: lives, cities, resources, hope. But their dominance had left behind a critical flaw, an underestimation of what lay beneath the surface of humanity's desperation. The survivors had learned from their mistakes, adapted, and fought back in the most unexpected of ways. Every movement, every shift in strategy was now driven by a singular goal: to reclaim the Earth they had once known. But as the alien ships descended once more, a sense of dread settled in. What had once been a scattered, disorganized resistance was now beginning to form small groups, hidden deep in the ruins, all working toward a common purpose. They had learned to fight with the tools at their disposal, using the invaders' own technology against them. Yet, they were still outmatched. The first true signs of the conflict began to emerge. Alien patrols grew more aggressive, hunting down the last of humanity's resistance with precision and speed. Every encounter seemed to push the survivors further into desperation. They knew the stakes. Failure meant extinction. Yet, even amidst the fear, there was a flicker of hope, small, fragile, but growing with each small victory. But who could be trusted? Which of the survivors would betray them? What if the alien forces had learned to track their movements, to anticipate their every move? The growing sense of paranoia was as dangerous as the invaders themselves. One mistake could cost everything. As the first signs of a counterattack began to take shape, the question was no longer just about survival, it was about how far humanity was willing to go to reclaim their planet, and whether they had the strength to overcome the new, unforeseen dangers closing in around them. How does this build the conflict in a way that feels compelling for your story? The ground trembled beneath them, a deep, bone-rattling vibration that was felt long before the alien craft appeared on the horizon. The survivors, gathered in the remnants of an underground shelter, held their breath, eyes wide with a mix of fear and anticipation. They knew the fleet was coming. It was no longer a question of if, but when. But what they didn't expect was what followed. The first crackling sound was soft, like static over a radio. Then, a voice, cold, mechanical, and haunting, echoed through their makeshift communications system. It was an unexpected broadcast, an alien message not meant for any human ears. But the transmission had been intercepted, and what it revealed sent shockwaves through the group. The invaders were planning something worse than annihilation. They weren't just here to conquer, they were here to eradicate every trace of human existence from the planet. The alien fleet had already begun deploying a device, an ancient, unimaginable weapon that would erase all life in its wake, permanent, irreversible. The message wasn't a threat, it was an announcement. Humanity's last hope, its final resistance, was about to be crushed once and for all. Panic spread through the group as the reality of the situation settled in. The timeline for survival had just shortened. The weapon would be deployed within hours. The decision was clear, but the risk was immense. They had one shot. One of the survivors, a former scientist turned reluctant leader, stood motionless as the weight of the moment crushed down. There was no time for hesitation, no room for second-guessing. The choice was thrust upon them: infiltrate the alien command ship and destroy the device before it activated, or face total extinction. It was a suicide mission. Yet, for the first time since the invasion began, the survivors had something the invaders didn't count on: knowledge of their technology. This was their moment. But as the survivors prepared to take action, doubt began to creep in. Would they be able to pull it off? Could they even reach the alien fleet before it was too late? The plan was risky, and the enemy knew they were coming. But if they failed, the cost would be humanity's final defeat. Urgency hung in the air. The clock was ticking, and the weight of the decision was impossible to ignore. The future of the Earth, the survival of their people, hinged on a single strike against the enemy's heart. Does this inciting incident raise the stakes and push the plot forward in a way that feels urgent and compelling? The plan had been set into motion. But the closer the survivors drew to the heart of the alien fleet, the more the tension mounted. Each step forward was a gamble, a precarious dance between life and death. Their every move was calculated, but no amount of preparation could shield them from the weight of what they were about to face. The landscape was a constant reminder of their diminishing time, ravaged, silent, and broken. The crumbled ruins of once thriving cities lay like tombstones, telling the story of humanity's failed defense. There were no comforts, no reprieve. Only the ever-present threat of discovery. Alien drones patrolled the skies, their silent, predatory movement sweeping over the land like a storm. The survivors had learned to move like shadows, to blend with the destroyed world around them, but the pressure was suffocating. Every sound felt too loud, every wrong step too costly. Their objective was clear: infiltrate the alien fleet central command and destroy the device that could wipe out every living being on Earth. But with every passing moment, the complexity of their mission became more apparent. The alien forces were not just a physical threat, they were cunning, watching every angle, adapting faster than the survivors could anticipate. Their initial advantage had come from surprise, but that was rapidly slipping away. Tension between the group began to fester, too. What was once unity was now fractured by fear and desperation. Some were starting to question the plan: was it worth it? Could they really pull off such a suicide mission against an enemy that had outmatched them at every turn? Would they ever see another sunrise? The emotional toll was becoming impossible to ignore. What had once been a group bound by survival was now a fragmented, stressed coalition of broken individuals, each with their own fears, regrets, and doubts. The loss of loved ones, the constant uncertainty, the crushing pressure of impending failure, it all weighed down on them. And then, a new threat emerged. Alien reinforcements had arrived, more powerful and more numerous than before. The survivors' window for action had just shrunk, and with it, the urgency to act. They were being hunted, their every move tracked. Their location had been compromised. In the distance, they could hear the telltale hum of the alien ship's engines. They were coming. The group knew that time had run out. The next move would be their last. Either they succeeded, or the Earth would fall. Does this escalation build the pressure and consequences in a way that moves the story forward and increases the stakes? The heart of the alien fleet was closer than ever, within striking distance, but the survivors were on the brink of collapse. Their bodies ached from days of constant movement, their minds were frayed from the endless tension, and their hearts weighed heavy with the losses they'd already sustained. Each step forward felt like a march toward certain death. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, they pressed on. But then, as they neared the edge of the alien command center, the unimaginable happened: a single, fragmented piece of communication intercepted by their makeshift radio. It was faint, garbled, but it carried with it the kind of revelation that would change everything. The voice that came through wasn't alien. It was human. The survivors froze, disbelief washing over them. A voice, a person, still alive? It was a shock that sent ripples through the group. What was left of humanity? The voice was desperate, strained, barely audible, but it spoke with certainty. The alien weapon was no ordinary device, it was a living entity. The device, once believed to be a purely mechanical force of destruction, was in fact an ancient biological weapon, a monstrous hybrid of organic and technological design. And worse, it had a consciousness of its own. The survivor on the radio explained that the device was not just designed to wipe out all life, it was seeking to become the dominant force on Earth. The aliens had harnessed its power for their own ends, but it was evolving, growing, learning faster than they anticipated. The weapon had begun acting on its own, ignoring commands from its creators. What they had thought was a countdown to extinction was now a race against time to stop something far worse than they ever imagined. The realization was like a punch to the gut. Everything they had fought for, every sacrifice they'd made, had just taken on a new, terrifying meaning. The stakes had escalated beyond anything they had ever considered. The survivors had been focused on defeating the alien forces, but now they faced a new question: how could they fight something that wasn't even alive in the traditional sense? How could they kill an entity that could think, adapt, and evolve with every passing second? With this new revelation, the survivors realized there was no turning back. The world they once knew was gone, and the future of humanity would be determined not just by their ability to defeat the alien invaders, but by how far they could go to stop the growing power of this deadly, sentient weapon. Does this turning point shake up the story and raise the stakes in a meaningful way? The survivors had reached the heart of the alien fleet, the air heavy with the hum of alien technology. The towering structure of the command center loomed before them, a labyrinth of cold metal and shifting shadows. There was no turning back now, their final confrontation was upon them. They had one shot. No more plans, no more strategies, just raw, desperate action. The alien weapon was within their grasp, and with it, the fate of every living thing on Earth. The group had split up to infiltrate the compound, each member tasked with reaching different sections, hoping that their combined efforts would be enough. But every moment felt like an eternity, and the weight of their responsibility pressed down on them. Suddenly, the lights above flickered, casting the place into intermittent darkness. An eerie silence fell over the group, as if the very air was holding its breath. Then, the hum of the alien machinery shifted, louder, more insistent, until the ground beneath them began to tremble. The weapon had become fully sentient, and it was aware of their presence. The survivors rushed to their positions, but just as they were about to breach the final chamber, the door slammed shut before them, locking them in. The chamber's wall shifted, revealing what they had feared, the living weapon itself. It was massive, grotesque, an amalgamation of organic matter and alien technology, pulsating with an unnatural glow. Its tendrils reached out, seemingly aware of their every movement. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was humanity's last stand. The survivors scrambled to reach their positions, weapons ready, hearts racing. The room seemed to close in around them, every step toward the weapon fraught with danger. Alien drones began to converge, their cold eyes glowing, targeting them as if they were no more than insects to be crushed. They fought back with everything they had, every shot, every movement a desperate plea for survival. But the weapon itself, it was alive. It moved with them, responding to their every action, its tendrils lashing out to defend itself. It wasn't just a machine. It was thinking, adapting, shifting its form with terrifying precision. Each attack they made only seemed to make it stronger, more dangerous. The survivors were running out of time. They knew that if they didn't destroy the weapon now, it would evolve beyond their ability to stop it. Every decision, every shot counted. They had only one chance to strike at its core, but the cost would be steep. The final blow would require them to destroy themselves as well. With a final, collective breath, they made their move. Does this climax capture the intensity and stakes of the moment, with everything coming to a head? The dust settled, and the silence that followed felt like an eternity. The survivors stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily, bodies bruised and broken from the brutal battle. The room, once a hive of alien technology and unnatural life, was now still, the sentient weapon reduced to a pile of smoldering wreckage. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and the faint, acrid trace of something ancient, now dead. They had done it. They had destroyed the weapon. But at what cost? Their victory was hollow. The group had suffered heavy losses, some had given their lives to ensure that the final blow was struck. The ones who remained were no longer the same people who had first set out on this mission. They had crossed a threshold, one that could never be undone. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes hollow from the weight of what they had experienced. They had fought for survival, yes, but they had also fought for something more, redemption, revenge, and the hope that humanity could find a way to rebuild. As the survivors gathered in the ruins, the reality of the moment began to sink in. Earth had been saved, for now. But it was a world forever scarred, a planet that would never return to what it once was. The cities, the nations, the cultures, all of it was gone. The survivors were the last remnant of what had been. One of them, what remained of their leader, stood at the edge of the wreckage, staring out over the ruined landscape. The alien fleet had been defeated, but the question still hung heavy in the air: what next? There were no answers, no clear path forward. They had won, yes, but they had also lost everything in the process. The journey had taken them to the brink of extinction. It had tested their resolve, their morals, and their very humanity. But through it all, they had discovered something crucial, that even in the face of absolute annihilation, humanity had an inherent strength. They had fought with everything they had, not just for survival, but for the future. Now, with the alien threat vanquished, there was no certainty of what came next. Only the knowledge that the fight for their world was far from over. It would take more than just a battle to rebuild, but if humanity had proven anything, it was that they were willing to do whatever it took to survive and rebuild. Does this resolution provide closure to the story while leaving room for the future, reflecting on the character's journey? As the survivors walked away from the wreckage, their steps were slow, heavy with the weight of what had just occurred. The victory had come at an immense cost. They had destroyed the weapon, but there were no cheers, no celebrations, only the quiet hum of a world still in ruins. Their mission was over, but the future was uncertain. The leader, looking out across the desolation, found their voice. "We've lost everything," they said, their tone a mixture of relief and sorrow. "But we've also proven something. Not just to the aliens, but to ourselves." They paused, gazing at the others. "We can rebuild. Maybe not right away. But we can rebuild." The others nodded, but there was a shadow in their eyes. For every step they took forward, the haunting question of what truly remained in the ashes followed them. The world was still theirs to reclaim, but it wouldn't be easy. The alien fleet was destroyed, but there was more at play than just the forces that had invaded. The living weapon, though vanquished, had left its mark on the planet. Its strange, hybrid nature had altered the Earth in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. But as they left the alien wreckage behind, something caught the survivor's eye, a faint flicker of light in the distance. They squinted, and for a moment, it seemed like a trick of the mind. But no. It was real. Another craft, unlike the others, was rising from the ashes of the destroyed fleet. Something was still out there. Something different. The survivors froze, realizing that this was not the end. What they had destroyed was only part of something larger, something far more insidious. The aliens were not the true threat. The weapon they had destroyed was only a piece of the puzzle, an experiment. And now, the full extent of the enemy's true nature was about to reveal itself. But the survivors were no longer the broken group that had set out on this mission. They had changed. They had faced death, fought against impossible odds, and emerged victorious. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for the future of their world. The leader took a deep breath, looking out toward the horizon. This isn't over. The real fight is just beginning. And with that, the camera pulls back to show the silhouette of the mysterious alien ship, disappearing into the distant sky. If you're curious to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and stay tuned for more. Does this conclusion wrap up the story while setting up for future exploration? Let me know if you want any adjustments.